Hello, everybody. We're doing something a little different with these next couple episodes of No Driving Gloves. We've interviewed Sterling from 3D Car Printing, and the interviews went a little bit long. There's really a heavy video portion. So episode 140 of No Driving Gloves will be the audio interview with Sterling. Episode 141 is going to be the walk-around video with Sterling. We highly recommend you check out our Patreon page, No Driving Gloves, and you can see the video, the audio quality, because he's moving around and at the fringes of his network. It's pretty bad in that episode. And then episode 142 will be a replay of Sean's interview with Sterling from 2019 when he was doing his own radio show, 0 to 60. And you can see where the car was a year ago and what Sean got out of him then, and reflect on episode 140, what we got out of him now, as the car's greatly progressed in the year since. We do thank you for your time today, and we hope you enjoy this 3-episode arc covering Sterling from 3D Car Printing. Thank you.
Game on.
Welcome, everybody. No Driving Gloves again. The team that we have tonight is obviously me. I never go away. You always have to listen to me drone on and on. Then we have Sean, and we have Derek tonight.
Hello.
We've got a guest tonight. Sean reached out. I know Sean's talked to this gentleman before. He's kind of doing, I want to say, extensive, interesting project. I think something a lot of us would love to undertake. But we have Sterling from 3D Car Printing. He's in the process working with his son. I believe it's like a STEM project, and I'm assuming teaching him 3D printing. And to me, that's a wave of the future. You know, I've got my 3D printer here in the studio with me and love tinkering with it when I have time. And I have my CNC in the garage and all of that fun stuff. But Sterling, you want to give us like just a 1-minute intro, and then we'll try to pull some stuff out of you as we go and get.
Yeah, sure. I'm a scientist by training. So I'm a PhD laser physicist. I work for a company called 4 Labs that distributes lasers and componentry all over the world. So I've always been into science and technology, engineering and mathematics, obviously, but I'm also a car guy. So I love building cars. Previous project was a 69 Mustang. So I've rebuilt engines, put cars back together, but never anything to this magnitude, which is building something from scratch. This is kind of new for me, and I wanted to basically just show kids how cool technology could be, especially my son and my daughters, of course. Then we wanted to outreach to other kids and just really, why would we pick such a beautiful car? It's to get the conversation started with the kids, because they see it and they go ooh and ah, so they want to find out more. So that's kind of where we started this project, and a little bit of who I am.
Go into a little bit of the background as to why you chose that car, though, because I find that pretty cool. Like the reasons behind. I know there's the ooh and ah, there's the ooh my, that's amazing factor, but there was a backstory that you gave me before the last time we talked that I thought was a really cool tie-in.
Sure.
Current times.
Yeah, the backstory on why we chose this project was my son and I like playing Forza Horizon 3. And we always get in the Lamborghini Aventador. It's always been one of my favorite cars when it came out in, I think, 2012. And it basically just captured kind of, for me, all of the design elements that Lamborghini had done over the years in their flagship cars. And my son Xander both fell in love with the Aventador as well, but also the Urus, which is their new SUV. So those are the big cars that we would play in the video game. And just quipping one day, my son turns to me and says, "Dad, could we build one of these?" And I didn't have a good answer, because I wanted to say yes, because I've always wanted to build a supercar. So it's something I've always wanted to do, but I knew that it was going to be expensive. It was going to be a lot of work. And my son has about a 20-minute attention span, just like everybody else's kids. So you have to bear that in mind when you get into a project like this that you're doing with your children. They're going to come into the project, but they're not going to be there 100% of the time that you're working on it. So I said yes. So it wasn't just for him, it was for me as well. But I think a lot of people like that story, that we were just kind of sitting there, and most dads would have said, no.
Have you lost your mind?
Are you a car guy? Do you have background car experience? Did you wrench in high school, have your muscle car or whatever? Or did you just go into this and say, let's figure this out?
Yeah, no, I am a car guy from way back when. My first car was a 68 Fire Chicken. I bought for $600, and it was a real, pile. So I and my father at the time spent a lot of time putting it back together. And after we were done, it was great because it was still a piece of crap.
Yeah. Sean had the sister to your car, being a Camaro. And, I think Derek started with a 74 GTO, or that was early on in his life. And, they were able to wrench and play with things. I was a car stereo guy. So I built car stereos in my car, and, it was all wiring and that, never any performance. I was the guy that you hear 2 miles away, and I'm partially deaf from it today. But why did you choose to print the Lamborghini or create your own scratch body? One of the children in the house here came up to me and said, hey, can we build a car? The first thing I'm going to do is, yeah, we can. And I'm going to look at, some sort of pre-assembled kit to do it, to 3D print an entire car. I mean, the manufacturers are just beginning to experiment with that. What possessed you to go, hey, we're going to build it, and we're going to build every little bit of it?
I think mainly desperation. And the reason I say that is because we started out, when I first thought about it, I'm like, well, I can't afford to buy Lamborghini parts. They're just too expensive, even from a salvage yard. We knew that we had to do most of the car from scratch. We were going to use standard coach building techniques. We were going to cut out a buck out of plywood and hammer some metal around it. That's kind of the idea that I had at first. And then I got involved with 3D printing at work, probably about 5 or 6 years prior to that. And it was cute. And you could make little knickknacks and crap you could put on your shelves and whatnot. And so it was kind of interesting, but it really wasn't that practical. And then I took a look back again when I was trying to figure out how we were going to do the body, back at 3D printing, and saw how far it came, especially in the desktop printers that you could buy from, say, Amazon. The smaller format printer. There's no industrial printer involved in this project. This is something that we bought for under $1,000. That's when I decided, let's give it a go. Let's try it. Let's print out a panel. Let's see how it looks. And then we had to figure out, okay, so now we have a plastic car panel. We're going to take it outside. It's going to melt in the sun, and we're going to have a big pile of goo around a frame. So that wasn't going to work. That's when I did some research on YouTube University and saw people who were skinning parts in carbon fiber and fiberglass and other things. And I thought, well, hey, we could do carbon fiber. The aerospace industry has cut the price of carbon fiber dramatically because of all of the aircraft now that are made out of carbon fiber. So getting the mat way back when was very expensive, and nowadays it's pretty inexpensive. And so we decided that's what we're going to do, is try to skin these parts with carbon fiber.
Go back to printing the part. I'm going to 3D print an Aventador door. No pun intended. You're going to print an event. You're going to print a door.
It has a vent and a door.
Like you said, you bought your printer on Amazon for less than $1,000. So you don't have a printer like you can even see at some of the maker fairs and that will print an entire door. You're printing puzzle pieces that you're assembling into a door, and then I assume bonding and gluing together, and then kind of skinning them in the carbon to, like you said, number one, protect them from melting in that, but also I'm assuming to give them a smooth finish. I know in your Facebook and going through all the photos, there's a really good shot, I think, of the front bonnet that it looks like it's 9 pieces or something that are glued together, and you can kind of see the filler or whatever you're using to smooth the panels together. That's the way you're doing it, correct? You're just not printing a quarter panel or printing a fender, etc.
That's correct. What we do is we use a program called SolidWorks, 3D modeling program. It's actually a professional version that I use through my work, and I have access to it at night. When what I do is I chop it up, make it fit inside the printer, and each section has a number to it, and we print out each section, and then you are correct. We epoxy those sections together. Now, things don't always go to plan. I've printed 4 bumpers in my career doing this. The reason is because we end up with distortions and other problems from the 3D printing process. So I want to make it pretty clear that this is not just, hey, hit the print button and you're ready to ride. There's a lot of...
Not something you downloaded on Thingsverse?
No, I actually found a 3D model of a 10th scale toy. That's what I ported over into our modeling software. And then I had to blow it up full size because I knew the wheelbase and the track width. And then I made some modifications to it because, frankly, I didn't want to get in trouble with Lamborghini. So I wanted a wide body car. So we'd stretched it 100 millimeters in the rear and 50 in the front. We changed the panels a little bit. That's basically what I read to, how you stay out of trouble, other than not making parts. That's a big no-no with Lamborghini.
And don't call it a Lamborghini. Yeah, that's another big one.
Yeah, and don't build a full Lamborghini
Right.
and then try to sell it as a Lamborghini. That is the big thing that they made clear is that they're still against fakes and copying. But they said that this story was something that they had just not heard of before. And in our conversations, that really, they were taking a risk. They were taking a big risk with us.
So you did reach out to Lamborghini and you've had communications and they're totally aware of...
They reached out to you, didn't they?
I have a friend who works at Tufts University who's Italian, and he knew a guy who worked with Lamborghini in marketing. And so I told him, hey, put out the feelers and just see what they think. Give me something back like, hey, the project's cool, or hey, stop making a replica. Whatever the word was going to be, I just wanted to hear it. Then I got a phone call from their chief marketing officer, and I thought I was in serious trouble.
How did it come up on your phone? Did it literally say Lamborghini Automobili?
No, it came up on my phone. It was in the, I recognize the country code as Italy, but I have a lot of colleagues to work with over in Italy. And so I didn't think anything of it. I just thought it was one of my colleagues calling, that I just didn't have that number in my phone. And she introduced herself, and very, very nice lady. She just amazing. And then I understand why she's in the position she is right now after my many conversations with her. After I found out that I wasn't in trouble, I wasn't going to get sued back to the...
How long into the call?
It was pretty quick.
Okay, good. I didn't leave you hanging.
She said, hey, we want to discuss a project with you. I'm like, a project with me? What do you want from an idiot like me? I mean,
we would like you to make our replacement panels for all of our North.
Yeah. And it's like I'm now talking basically to the Pope, in my view.
That's awesome.
I've idolized Lamborghini ever since I was a kid, but it was a great conversation. I was stunned. And then they said, after she kind of outlined, basically said that they wanted to surprise my son by doing a Christmas video, and they were going to bring a real Aventador to our home and replace it with my replica, so that Xander could come out and be surprised that you can see in the video where I lean over to him and I say, I think I got it done. And the door rises and Xander's sitting there with just this shock on his face. It was genuine, by the way. That was not scripted. So that was the first time he'd seen the car and knew what was going on.
Oh, that's cool.
So
that's cool.
We did a pretty good job of keeping it. It helped because at that point I'd done like 20 or 25 interviews, local TV, national, that kind of stuff. And so he was kind of none the wiser, except for the fact that Lamborghini flew 25 people over from Italy to do this whole thing. Blew my mind.
Like 25 people hanging out in your driveway?
In my house. I mean, And it was funny because the Italians are great because they just like all of a sudden you have another 25 people added to your family. They were amazing people. The production company they got, Indiana Productions, was awesome. They left a very small footprint in our house. They were very respectful. It was completely the opposite of what I thought it was going to be. The Lamborghini people, again, were like, hey, you're part of the family now. It was just, and at that point I was thinking, amazing. Yeah, is there somebody I have to kill now? Is that how this works?
We're going to let you finish the car.
Hey, whoa. John and I both, we can attest that, you're just part of the family. You're just part of the family. You don't have to do anything, okay?
Until we ask. Okay? Until we ask of you. That's awesome.
I find it interesting that you say you were basically embraced by Lamborghini. And I watch another channel, we've talked about it, YouTube channel, VinWiki. There's a whole story about the Lykan Hypersport that was used with Fast and the Furious and all of that. He reached out to W Motors, and W Motors is being very supportive of his project in STEM. And to me, it really makes the little guys down the road from Lamborghini kind of look bad, because anytime I'm a big replica follower, kit car guy, and a lot of times when McBurney replicas, Ferrari Daytona replicas come up and things like that, everybody talks about the lawsuits and litigation and Mercedes 300 SL Gull Wings and things like that. And it really hurts them. But Lamborghinis, to me, they don't like the replica because no matter what, even in the Cobra world, they hurt the values and some of that. But it's great to see them recognizing what you're doing, why you're doing it. And it's not to have a Lamborghini, it's to teach your children, and you're taking it out and trailering it to schools and show them what you're doing. You're trying to get kids involved in STEM programs and hopefully into cars.
And I got to tell you, I think Lamborghini's main goal is that they just want to project when you buy a Lamborghini, your family. And I really think that that's kind of the message here is that they kind of brought us in and they just treated us like, we were one of the gang, that we were family, that we could basically do no wrong. It was, it's an impressive, I deal with a lot of high power companies and a lot of really good companies. That's how they take care of their customers is that they're very attentive to them and they treat them like family. And I think that's how you get repeat customers. They called up one Wednesday afternoon while I was at work, and they said, hey, Sterling, what are you and Xander doing this weekend? And I was like, well, I don't care what I'm doing this weekend. What am I doing this weekend? And they said, well, we have this thing that we're doing up in Aspen where they're driving these Uruses and Huracans around the track in the snow up in Aspen. And they wanted to know if we would come. I basically said, well, I'm in my car, I'm packed. What's the address?
Yes. Yes. Yeah, the answer is always yes.
Yeah, exactly. And so it was interesting because I got there and I really had a preconception about who I was going to meet. I was going to meet very rich people, very snooty people, just basically would, look down their nose at you and stuff like that. And when I originally walked into the super fancy hotel I had never been like before in my life, it was like the Ritz in Aspen. When I met the crew, they're just all car people. Everyone that I met were self-made. So they were people who take a risk in business, had beat their butts to the bone, and then had made them themselves and now could afford such a luxury car and were going to these events. And they were just car people. It was so refreshing. I was flabbergasted by most of the people I met.
I'm really good friends with a couple of Lamborghini owners, and one of them actually has a 12 Aventador and then has a SV, and he's had Lamborghinis as long as I've known him, the dozen years plus that I've known him, and other drivers, and they really are a lot of them are really car people. And don't get me wrong, there are some that portray kind of what you were fearful of meeting, but even my friend who spent more money than I'm ever going to make in my life, unless something changes here drastically, he was going to Italy. He called Lamborghini and he said, "Oh, could I possibly meet Valentino Baboni?" And they said, "Yeah, maybe." He goes, "I would love to take him to lunch. Will he be available?" And they said, "I don't know. Here, ask him." And they handed him the phone, and he's on the phone with Valentino as a friend making dinner arrangements. It's just, I don't want to make this a story about how great Lamborghini is, but it's, very, very friendly. Getting back to your car, Sean and I had the conversation. He wasn't sure, how you were doing, if you were skinning or making molds, etc. But as somebody who does 3D printing, when you're printing these panels and then you're assembling them, I said something to Sean, if it was me, I would be printing them and then I would be adjusting the fill and, printing them at, I guess, the thickness and things like that for the listeners that are really into 3D printing.
Obviously, this is, not something where you can go and look up very readily. I saw that there's somebody in a few years ago who was doing like a DB4 and they were 3D printing some of the body parts. Really, the formula we had to come up with ourselves. So printed 4 bumpers. The reason I printed 4 bumpers is because the first one I did, I printed it. It looked great. I'd use some body filler to kind of fill in any distortions like warpage and things like that you get from the printer. We try to smooth it out as much as possible. Basically just use kind of standard body technique on the part. And then we found that instead of just laying the carbon fiber on top of it with epoxy, what we needed to do was vacuum infuse the part with carbon fiber and epoxy. And so we watched a bunch of videos on that, some professional videos, and then others by YouTubers. And then so I took my first part, which was the rear bumper of the Aventador. And at this point, we weren't doing an SV. We were doing just a standard Aventador. The SV change came a little later. We put it into a vacuum bag. The vacuum helps the atmospheric pressure push down on the part and adhere the carbon fiber to the part, as well as giving it some solidity to the carbon fiber when the epoxy cures. We pulled a vacuum on the part and we immediately crushed it into basically a little ball. So that was our first go at it. Yeah, we're starting off as idiots, basically, not knowing what the hell we're doing and how we're doing it. But we learned a huge amount from that one mistake. And that's always my philosophy to the kids. Fail, but learn from your failure. So that's really important.
Yeah, that's all failure is a learning and teaching experience.
When are you coming out with the 3D car printing for dummies book?
So I'm working with a lot of builders right now who are trying to, attempt this process or part of this process. And so I'm telling them basically what I've learned from all of the mistakes that we've made. So I have a formula now for printing out the panels, and I basically just give that to folks who need it. But I do it on a you ask, I tell basis. So I'm not. Last thing I want to do is make any money on this project. I just want to get the information out. I don't have time to write a book. People criticize my
the book's writing itself, Sterling. You don't even have to write it.
Yeah, people criticize my videography on YouTube, and I tell them, take a hike. I don't care. I'd rather be working on that.
Right.
So
yeah, that's not what you're into.
You don't like my cell phone? It's tough. Go somewhere else. Go watch B is for Build or something. They've got more professional stuff.
We're not even going to get into that right now with what's going on with them. That actually is a fairly decent segue though. Coming if we want to go back around to how cool Lamborghini has been and what those folks are going through with a particular Mustang right now, with how bad it can go.
Yeah,
it speaks volumes. That particular Italian brand, man. I
was really into the Huracan build because of what we were doing here. And we just had so many, I think, corollaries to the things that we were doing. And then I saw them near the end, they started picking up some 3D printing. So that was great. Anymore or anything like that. I just like what they do. So that's been great. Watching other people do those things. And what I really liked on Videos for Build, as opposed to some of the other channels, is that they screwed up a lot and then came back and told you why they screwed up and why they did something wrong and what they were going to do to fix it. And so that always really made me happy to see that particular type of information that they were giving out, because it's kind of the same philosophy that we have here.
Folks like to see the fail. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say it's always good when they show the failure, and so many people avoid it and make it look perfect. And I know in the B is for Build, how many times did they have to mold and remake the doors for that car?
Right.
He failed and failed for a couple of episodes till they finally figured it out. I almost got tired of watching the episode.
I like to see the thought process that goes like from start to finish. Literally, the thought process that goes into the fail in my mind is every bit as important as the fix and getting to the finished product. It's very cool to see the idea that sparks it and then how it evolves as you progress. And then, there are people out there that are literally seeing the process that you've come up with, Sterling, that are going, well, I could take that and then I could do this and we could tweak this and we could do, and it's going to evolve into something. I don't necessarily want to get into the what's Sterling's vision for how this is going to impact, garage car building, hot rodding, just car construction in general for the hobbyist in the future just yet, because I'd really like for folks to know a little more about your particular car before we get into that prognosticating of how this is going to impact future hobbyists.
And it's going to happen.
It's definitely going to happen.
Whether it's our project or somebody else's, it's going to happen. That's just the way technology works.
Yeah, and I want to jump in and ask a couple questions. I'm going to back up even to the beginning of the episode a little bit. You talked about when you first started talking about the idea, possibly going the old, coach building way of bucks and hammering out metal. And then you came along with the 3D printing idea, and you talk about some of your failures that have occurred. I grew up kind of doing body work, and that's, my dad restores cars and does kind of coach metal work and things like that. And, there's difficulties to each, whether you're working on a curved panel or a flat panel or compound curved panel. I've dabbled about, that much in 3D printing. In the museum world and objects conservation, we are starting to use it to make replica parts, things like that, which we're also doing in the antique automotive restoration world. Printing these pieces of panels and putting them together. Are you finding different challenges from flat panels to curved panels that you're working on? Some of these different things, are there different techniques that are evolving depending on the shape of the panel, the way you have to put it together to make it work right? I'm really curious about these things.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. You have parts where, panels get close to overlapping one another. You've got these compound curves and things like that. Now, 3D printing can handle a lot of that from an outside perspective, but when you look at the interior structure and the fact that, hey, at some point I have to put a carbon fiber skin on this and I can't create any voids in the part, because if you do that, epoxy gets in there, it heats up when it starts to cure, and it just melts the part. We've had that happen many, many times. So that's a big one right there. I think the biggest advantage that we have for 3D printing body panels is that when I do a body panel, all I have to do is say mirror around Y, print again. And now I have an exact replica that is a mirrored replica for the other side. So that is a huge advantage. So I only had to design effectively half the car, right? And then the rest, I just, mirrored it, and everything worked out great. So yeah, that's a very good point. You do have to still keep that in mind when you're doing these parts, because it's not a simple process. It seems simple from the surface, but once you get into the encapsulation in carbon fiber, that's where I think it really gets into the gritty details and becomes almost as difficult as forming metal.
you're doing full encapsulation, right? You're doing front
We're
and
doing
back of
full
the part.
encapsulation. One of the things, again, this was because even before we talked to Lamborghini, we didn't want to have it appear we were making molds.
Okay.
So we wanted it to appear that we were doing a project for STEM and STEAM, and this was a one-off. And basically, we were just helping garage builders, kids, to see how you could do things really from your own garage if you had the passion and the time and the ability to do this, or the ability to learn is the biggest part of that. I didn't know if this was even going to work. This was a complete Hail Mary.
I've seen you driving it, man. It's working. There's no doubt.
I drove it today. The local police
Did you really?
department already gave me the thumbs up on driving it down my street. So
Nice. Very nice. Talk about a little bit about before we get into that future prognostication that I was talking about. What are all of these printed panels going on to? Like, what's the chassis? What's the drive line? What makes up the guts of the car? Because it's cool, man. I mean, it's underneath. It's kind of hot rod.
It's very hot underneath. I'm telling you, it's that's where I've probably gotten the most criticism from people is on the frame, because I didn't get it from anywhere. I built it myself. Look, guys, I'm a physicist. Okay. I think I can do math. I think I can do statics. I think I understand strengths and materials and things of that nature. Yeah, I got this. A frame is not rocket science. It's not like I'm taking this and doing the Pikes Peak hill climb with it, right? I'm taking it around to schools. It's not going to see a track. So the point is that, it's a standard ladder frame. But you get into a very good point, Sean, and that is, now I've got these panels. I've got this frame. How do I put them on?
Yeah.
And frankly, that has been one of the hardest things of this whole project. How do I attach the panels to the frame?
Have you done it?
I have done it.
I know, but how?
Well, I had to come up with some techniques for attaching the panels. I finally decided to use some steel in certain places where it made sense. When we go around and look at the car, I'll show you some of the metal work that I've actually done with my crappy Harbor Freight brake and my set of hammers, which is basically all I have to do metal work. The point is that I'm using some of those techniques to attach the panels to the car.
You gotta do what you gotta do.
You gotta do what you gotta do. I put basically inserts into the carbon fiber panels, panel bond them in. I try to have a mechanical attachment to the front side of the panel so that, it's not just going to pop off when I'm going down the road. So I'm not going to be shedding panels. But trying to make it a solid mount to the chassis has been very challenging. And funny enough, I would say it's one of the most challenging things we've done.
Driveline wise, what are we talking about?
We're talking something pretty ubiquitous for a mid-engine car. Or a mid-engine kit car, which is, I've got an LS1. I mean, okay. I chose an LS1 because A, they're cheap. B, the aftermarket is enormous. And then that makes the aftermarket less expensive. And they're good engines.
That's right. They sure are, Sterling.
That's why I chose it. Do we have a Chevy guy in the house? Is that
you didn't read my bio?
Well, wait, Derek. You'll appreciate more of the stuff that's in the car then.
I was going to say, I'm sure one of the Chevy engineers probably ran by your house before the C8 was introduced to make sure,
Got it from a junkyard in Iowa, and it's worked ever since. I hadn't started it since Lamborghini was here in December, and I fired it up about a week ago, and it just lit right up. It survived the winter without any issues. After that, I'm using a 911 Porsche transaxle, inverted. That's typical. There's a company called Kennedy Engineering that makes a beautiful kit to put the two parts together. So it's a 6-speed manual. So it's the only gated shifted Aventador, 6-speed.
Nice.
Yeah.
Be careful. It's not an Aventador. Be careful. Be careful. Pull that back. There you go. There you go. Allegedly.
Well,
So wait, actually, if it's an LS1, is it a Corventador?
there you
Is
go.
that-
Ooh,
Corvette.
Is that where we're going?
ooh, that works.
I don't think a Lamborghini would like that one.
No, I don't think Corvette would either. Actually, could you cut that, John? I might get in trouble.
That's a good segue for a Lamborghini story here. So when they were here, their director of marketing was here, a guy by the name of Pietro Donati. Fantastic guy. We talk almost every other week. At the time, the car had an Audi steering wheel in it. And the reason for that is very simple. The steering column was off of an Audi, which is what they use in the real Lamborghini. We got one of those from a junkyard, and I got the steering wheel as well. So he took one look at that and he said, that's not going to work. Then I got in the mail basically a real Aventador steering wheel for the car. That was their contribution to the project. Absolutely.
Wow.
That's a solid contribution. That is not an inexpensive piece of equipment.
I realize how hard for them that is to do. But again, it's just that feeling of family that they like to have projected from their company.
I didn't even realize that you had gotten that.
I know, it's the crowning jewel for the entire project, as far as I'm concerned.
That's epic. I judge cars. I literally, when I get into a car, and I know a lot of people do this, you put your hands on that. The first thing that I judge when I get in the car is this steering wheel something that I can have my hands on every time I get in here and be happy about it? The answer is no. I don't want the car. I literally will discount the entire car off of the steering wheel. That's cool, man. That's really cool that they went down that road.
Yeah.
They've gone over and above.
They have gone over and above. But I mean, it's the same thing. They don't like people copying and selling their cars. They just
right.
So if I can step back real quick, Sterling, because you said you built your own frame, ladder frame, pretty standard, like you say. But what did you make it? Yeah, what did you make it out of? Is it a steel frame, or what did you go with?
125 wall, 2x4 steel is the main box. Then that is crossed 2-inch chromoly tubing.
Oh, nice.
The nice thing is it's a mid-engine, right? So I don't have to worry about a drive shaft tunnel at all. So we could make the frame really strong. And then the engine cage or the rear subframe, which is still welded to the car. It's not bolted. It's actually welded all together. Is 2x3 tubing. And it's basically set up like you would see a kind of a standard Lamborghini Aventador rear subframe. They use aluminum. I'm using steel. So I really think the frame on this car is overbuilt. On the front of it, it's again 2x3 steel for the front subframe.
Very nice.
So you've got the Porsche transaxle in the back. Is it 911 Cayman Boxster? And did you keep that suspension layout as well, or
you opened a can of worms there, Ken?
I'm good at
my dirty little secrets.
I'm really good at it.
So it's a G96 -00 from, I think it was an 02 911. It's not built, so it has the standard guts in it. If I really wind this LS up, I could probably drop it in on the interstate if I wanted to. But that's something for down the road, right? Be able to drive it around first so we don't have to put a whole bunch of gas into it. And that doesn't help with the fact that I put twin hair dryers on the LS.
I know you were talking about doing that. I didn't know whether you'd actually gotten to that or not.
I actually
did. You do it? Okay.
They're on.
What kind of power is it putting out, or do you even know?
I have no idea. I'm hoping to be somewhere around 500, maybe 600, somewhere in that range. The transaxle can handle that, but it just can't handle the torque.
Yeah, I mean that transaxle is a 450 to 500-ish horsepower transaxle.
Maybe. Right.
Maybe. Yeah.
So So if I'm not launching the bloody thing, it'd probably do pretty well.
No launch controls.
No launch controls for me.
It's your own. You're your own launch control.
That
with
is
that,
exactly right.
I mean,
yes. So I can
put it on the chip and pong it, man.
Burn out my clutch instead of dropping my transaxle.
Totally. What's the front suspension?
So the front is a Mustang 2 setup, except for the fact that it's got a cantilevered suspension, front and rear.
Oh,
so I decided to go.
Definitely want to see that
with the kind of standard Aventador suspension system.
Okay.
It's great for the rear because it keeps the coilovers out of the airstream, and it's a little easier to adjust.
I will definitely pick your brain on that cantilever if you're cool with it, because we're building a Yeah, we're building the Spitfire autocross car that we're going to cantilever front and rear on it. That sounds amazing.
It's pretty simple. It's not rocket science.
Yeah, it doesn't need to be. It doesn't need to be. It just needs to balance the car.
You're just moving a force to a pivot, and that's it.
Right.
Getting all sciencey on us. Gosh, jeez.
It's not rocket science. It's just physics and lasers.
What's it?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just lasers. It's just
I
freaking
just have to
laser
retract my statement because the name of this car is getting longer because now we got Porsche parts in there, Mustang 2 parts. I mean, I don't even know where to go with the name of this thing now.
Oh, we haven't even scratched.
Oh yeah, well that's right. We got Audi in there. I mean, God.
Oh, wait till you see the Ford Thunderbird parts.
Oh, nice. Well, everybody on this podcast knows I'm a Thunderbird fan.
Super Coupe parts. What generation Thunderbird parts are on it?
96.
Okay.
So the half shafts are Thunderbird.
Oh, cool.
And they're both the right hand half shafts because I have a symmetric drivetrain, so everything's centered so that the half shafts have to be the same length.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's right.
Have you weighed it yet?
Well, they were $50. That's why I bought them.
$50 whole dollars.
$50 whole dollars.
That'll be the first part that you need spares of, definitely.
And then it's got Cobra hubs in the rear.
Okay.
I'm coming up on about 50 minutes or so here right now. I'm looking forward. We're going to do a walk around of the car, but I think that's much more for the people that are Patreon supporters and are be able to watch this for video. We'll still run the audio in case you want to listen beyond, but I think I want to wrap the show up there. And I want to get to the pontificating, but let's go ahead. And I always say you can find No Driving Gloves at nodrivinggloves.com and the Facebook pages, No Driving Gloves, Instagram, No Driving Gloves. Where do people go if they're not already following you, Sterling? Where do they go to find your build? What's your YouTube? What's your Facebook?
We do most of our updates on Facebook. It's called 3D Car Printing, like it says in your background. So you can just do that search, or you can go to facebook.com/LaserSterling.
I say if you just Google 3D car printing, there's a lot of things come up, and it's about me and my son and my Lamborghini is what the Google description is. That's how I found your Facebook. And then what's your YouTube?
YouTube channel is just LaserSterling.
I'm sorry, but I just got to say, like, he's got the coolest name to be able to do stuff with lasers. I mean, LaserSterling. I'm jealous. Laser Derek does not have a ring to it.
I don't know. It's got a little bit of a punch to it. We can hook you up.
LaserSterling. I'm going with Laser Yoder.
One of the questions I had, how are the students and how is your son reacting to this? Because first it's a Forza game, and then it's a question to dad, and then it's this dream, because it takes a while. We never asked how long it takes how much time and filament do you have in printing? Is the interest with your children still there, or has that 20 minutes went on and this is you, or are they still participating? And then how are the students when you take it and show it? Because everybody accuses kids not being into cars, and the four of us on this podcast have always said that kids are into cars. They're just into it a lot different with Forza and video games and that than we were as kids. You know, they weren't wrenching on things or running stereo wires, we talked earlier, and such. It's just a different way that they're into cars. And I think you're proving that your son from video games is into cars. But go back to my questions. Are your kids still interested? And then how are the other students that you've taken it to and shown it to reacting?
So, my kids still have a little bit of interest in the project. I wouldn't say that they were, full tilt into it, because at the end of the day, they got to be kids, right? So they've got to explore all of their interests. I try not to jam it down their throat, but when they want to help, they get to help. My daughter learned how to solder and how to do wiring about a month and a half ago. And she's been, every time I do some wiring or some soldering, she wants to help. It's that kind of thing where you throw out little nuggets that that they can help you with, that they'll learn something important. And then, the big one was a couple Saturdays ago, we got in the car fully dressed, and meaning all the panels were on it. And we... Not you,
the actual car.
Fully dressed. It was a family show.
You opened that door, man.
Anyway, we got in the car and we drove it around the driveway. So, and they were over the moon. they love that particular interaction. And maybe at the end of the day, that's the biggest interaction I get out of them is going around to car shows and them speaking about the car and telling people what they've actually done on it. All of them have been involved. My eldest daughter, who's a teenager, who could give a absolute rip about a car other than just driving it to her boyfriend, she helps me bleed the brakes, when I need help. She's not real involved, and she doesn't, ask, "Hey, Dad, what can I do on the car?" Then at the same time, she goes, "Dad, can you teach me how to weld?" I mean, that's huge, right?
It's humongous.
And so I set out a couple hours and I taught her how to MIG weld, and she's a natural. Her first bead was like perfect. And I was like, wow. That's amazing.
Are you sure you don't want to do more?
Could you do some of the welding? Because your dad sucks.
Right.
So I think it's really stuff like that where you take those opportunities as you can get them. Yes, I am doing most of the work. I don't want anybody, Xander and my daughters are, wholly involved in the project. It's a lot about me decompressing from work and doing something that I love and having a creative outlet. Again, if the kids want to come and they want to do something on the car, then I slow down and we do something.
It's cool that there's more investment in it. There's definitely more investment in it from your family than there would be if you had a Camry sitting in the driveway that you were hanging an exhaust system on or something like that. Like I know that seeing the fact that it has risen from nothing and they know that, their father has been the catalyst behind that and they've had their hands in it, they're going to care about that car more than they're going to care about the minivan or, whatever else. It's just cool. It's a way to get them invested in that project.
And, this car doesn't have a carburetor, has EFI, has a computer, has it's got CAN bus gauges on it. So we have to do some computer programming. So, it's going to show them kind of the latest technology that's out there for a car rather than an old Ford Mustang that has a carburetor on it. So that's the other cool thing is that it kind of prepares them for the future in the advancements that we have in cars today.
As far as the advancements that you're talking about, I know I alluded to it a little bit ago, and John did as well. You are, I don't want to say that you're the first person that's ever done a project of this scope with 3D printing. I don't know whether you are or not. You might be. You're definitely one of the first that's done it out of their own garage. I know.
Claim to be the first at any of this.
Right. Yeah. But I mean, you're definitely one of the first to take the technology, the 3D printing technology, and build what you've built as far as the panels on the car and create a bit of an audience and buzz around what you've done. That you can take some credit for that. You're allowed. You've built some cool stuff.
After, Sean, is I want to get it out there and I want people to be interested in stuff like this. So yeah.
How do you see it growing from here? Like, do you have a Sterling vision of where this goes? Like, I mean, are we looking at printers coming out that have a 6-foot bed and a 4-foot tall, height there, where you can literally, instead of having to piece together 9 pieces to make a door? I mean, do you think people are going to end up, if you're a serious hot rodder, you've got a printer big enough to print an entire hood in your shop?
Not because of me. Because of
I'm not saying because of you, but is it evolving?
I think people are going to go down this road with new materials coming out like nylons and polycarbonates and things like that, and the printers being able to handle those more sophisticated materials. People are going to be able to print panels as is and just pop them on the car. No carbon fiber, no fiberglass, nothing. Most of your modern car bumpers are a blend of polycarbonate and ABS. And they have filaments out now where I could actually go downstairs and print something out of that, and it can survive the environment. So I think you'll be seeing more of that, more printers that are able to handle those more sophisticated materials.
Being able to go to a hot rod shop or a tuning shop and saying, I want a cowl hood for my whatever, but I want an 8-inch cowl or an 8.25-inch cowl, and then they just print it right there.
Yeah, they use their industrial printer to print it. And the nice thing about the industrial printers versus the desktop printers is that they've figured out the formula. So you don't have to figure that out. So your part doesn't come out warped or distorted or anything like that. You're actually going to get a nice usable part. Whereas from the desktop printer, currently, we have to worry about all those settings. We have to worry about print failures and other things because we don't have the diagnostics that the industrial printers have. And so I think you're going to see more sophistication in those desktop printers in printing the more difficult materials, which is fantastic because then Joe Blow can have a 3D printer in his basement or his garage, blows a plastic part off of his expensive Beamer, and now he can just print it back out and pop it in rather than taking it to the...
I have a Mercedes sitting in the garage right now that's literally one of four, and the rear wing doesn't exist. And I need a rear wing for the car if I want to put it back to original spec. And I mean, John and I have actually sat and looked at this thing. And John, years ago, the first time he looked at it, he's like, you need to get it printed. And back then, the tech was just kind of But now when you say you need to get it printed, it's kind of like, oh, crap, you can do that.
Yeah.
you can do that, and it's easy.
We have a local company here of all places that actually prints all sorts of materials. They print titanium, tantalum, tungsten, copper. I mean, you name it, they can print it. And I know that Koenigsegg has printed their new turbos out of titanium. Their new turbo that actually has no turbo lag because they can have these fancy schmancy chambers inside of the turbo that you couldn't do with standard techniques that you can only do with 3D printing. And so, now that that's coming out from the manufacturers, now it's only from the manufacturers who have low volume and exclusive clientele that's going to start to proliferate down into the...
Koenigsegg tech is definitely going to proliferate. That shop, they do some amazing things, man.
Well, I think this is interesting, John, because, this ties back to the Brian Fuller episode we did just, a couple episodes ago?
Yep.
For, the avid listeners, Brian was 3D printing titanium parts for his motorcycles and welding them together. And I mean, it just shows, I think the two shows that we have done, the two episodes, there we go, so this doesn't get confusing. These two episodes really help show the advancements of 3D printing and how far we've come, basically what we're on probably the verge of with 3D printing parts and components and where things are going to head and change the industry quite drastically in the next few years.
Yeah, and I belong to a group called 3D Print My Ride. And, it's a nice open forum for guys going, hey, I tried to print this and it went to hell in a handbasket. And then I tried this material and it worked great. You're seeing a lot more of those types of groups popping up where people are helping each other from the garage standpoint. And we're using those technologies that are being developed by the manufacturers at a somewhat more basic level, but we're still using that technology.
I'm so excited to see where this has already gone. And just sitting here thinking about where it's going, like Derek just said, this is something that it's now. It's not a decade from now. It's not even 5 years from now. It's literally the processes that are being put into place and developed right now for doing what you're doing in the garage. Anyone can do it. Anyone can do it. Like it's amazing.
You asked about the future of this, and it really brings the point home. What my future is for this project is to get kids interested in science and technology. That is the end goal for this entire project, and to go get ice cream in this sucker because it's pretty cool.
There's that too. Yeah.
I say it's got to be great for all of your children's, say, college resumes, and then going into life resume. If they wanted to get into this, as John was saying, 3D printing is getting bigger. I've said for years, the Amazon of the future will be you go there, you buy a CAD file, and it's instantly emailed or downloaded to your 3D printer, and it's printed at your house, and you have it in a few hours, whatever it is, silverware or whatever, in just a short period of time. And it's just a thing that's going on. And, I mentioned Thingsverse earlier, and there's a couple other websites that you can get on and download files and almost print them. They always need some sort of tweaking for your printer or whatever, but you can just, download files and start getting used to the settings of your 3D printer and that's how I did it before I started, creating models and being able to print some of the minor custom stuff I've done. I really want to explore the thing with Sean, but I want to get a slightly larger printer. Mine only has a 6x6x6 print volume, and I want to get up to something that's 12 by 12 by 12 or 12 by 12 by 8, be able to do a little bit larger part and some things like that. But it's just, you're right. I toured Penske Racing 12 years ago, and they had 2 3D printers, and they were showing me some of the stuff they were printing. And they said, well, within a couple of years, we'll be able to print actual usable suspension components. And then 8 years ago or so at the museum, we tested a printer, and still you're looking $12,000 at the time. And now you can get into it and just kind of experiment with it for 200. You can get a decent printer for $200. It's not going to be the greatest thing in the world, but $200 to $400 will get you involved, and you can start playing in that space. And I wanted to get into it as a restoration technician because there's so many things you can print. I'll jump to VinWiki again. In a recent episode they're interviewing a truck driver who has a Lamborghini Countach replica on a Fiero. And, the outside, and he, talks about what's changed and what's different, but the interior is never done. But he said with the advent of 3D printing, he can now order the vents for the dashboard, et cetera, to make it real. And that's the same thing. If I wanted to modify my car, I take the dimensions of the vents, print up new vents and pop them in. Or, I've designed my own iPhone holder to go into the car.
Yeah, a lot of people.
There's a lot of little things that you can do with them and end up with usable parts, and it's just all a little bit custom. So we've really, I said, talked a lot about the car and such, and got a lot of this interview out of the way. We've had some wind noise in the background and that's because we asked Sterling to be near the car. The car's been in the background for him. But let's go ahead. Want to go ahead and do a little bit of a walk around of the car and show us some of this stuff now. We'll try to narrate it the best we can for the audio listeners. But like I said, it'll be on the Patreon page. If you're a $5 or more Patreon, you get all the videos, but I'll let you know the little thing. Register for the page, sign up. It's not going to bill you until the first of the month. So right now, if you signed up for our Patreon, I don't know what date I have this scheduled to come out, but from the date of this episode to the end of the month, you can have and view all the videos for free. So we're not trying to get your money for watching that video in case you want to see, Sterling's walk around of the car here. It's on you, Sterling. Yep, there we go.